First contact gone wrong. The Discovery commander Elena Rodriguez stood before the massive observation window of mining station Omega-7, watching the automated harvesters work tirelessly on the asteroid surface below. The station floated in the silence of space, surrounded by the rich mineral deposits of the Kepler belt. For 3 years, she had overseen this operation, turning raw asteroids into the resources that powered humanity's expansion among the stars. The morning shift had brought unexpected news. Dr. Marcus Thompson, the station's chief xenobiologist, rushed into the command center with excitement written across his weathered face. His gray hair was disheveled and his lab coat bore the stains of hasty work. "Elena, you need to see this immediately," Marcus said, breathless from running through the station's corridors. The morning excavation team found something extraordinary in asteroid designation Alpha 47. Elena turned from the window, her dark eyes focusing on the scientists she had worked with for years. Marcus was not easily excited, which made his current state all the more concerning. "What kind of something, Marcus? Another rare metal deposit?" Marcus shook his head vigorously, pulling out a small containment unit from his coat pocket. Inside, a crystal unlike anything Elena had ever seen pulsed with an inner light. The crystal seemed to shift colors as she watched, moving from deep blue to brilliant white to warm gold. "This isn't from our solar system," Marcus explained, his voice barely containing his excitement. "The mineral composition is completely unknown. It responds to electromagnetic fields in ways that shouldn't be possible according to our current understanding of physics. Elena, this could revolutionize our technology." Elena took the containment unit, studying the mysterious crystal. As a former military officer who had served in 3 different conflicts during humanity's early expansion period, she had learned to be cautious about things that seemed too good to be true. "How much of this material did we find?" "The entire core of Alpha 47 is composed of these crystals," Marcus replied. "We're talking about enough material to change the course of human civilization. With proper research, these crystals could improve our faster-than-light drives, enhance our energy generation, maybe even advance our medical technology." Elena set the containment unit down carefully on her desk. "Have you run full security protocols on this material? We need to ensure it's not dangerous before we proceed with large-scale extraction." Marcus nodded enthusiastically. "All safety tests show the crystals are completely harmless to human contact. They seem to amplify certain types of energy while remaining completely stable. Elena, this discovery could secure humanity's future among the stars." Before Elena could respond, the station's communication officer, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, appeared at the entrance to the command center. Her usually calm demeanor showed signs of stress, and she clutched a datapad tightly in her hands. "Commander Rodriguez, we're receiving an incoming transmission from an unknown source," Lieutenant Kim reported. "The signal is unlike anything in our communication databases. It's definitely artificial, but the technology appears to be far more advanced than anything humanity has developed." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. In all her years of service, first contact scenarios had been theoretical discussions in military academies. Now she was potentially facing the reality of meeting another intelligent species. "Put the transmission through to the main display," Elena ordered, moving to stand behind her command console. "And activate all recording systems. If this is what I think it is, Earth Command will want every detail documented." The main screen flickered to life, showing a face that was unmistakably alien. The being had pale blue skin stretched tight over sharp facial features. Its eyes were larger than human eyes, colored a deep purple that seemed to swirl with its own inner movement. When it spoke, the universal translator struggled to process the alien language into understandable words. "Human creatures of this mining facility," the alien said, its voice carrying a tone of obvious superiority. "I am High Admiral Zexthon of the Vortani Empire. You are currently operating within territory that belongs to our civilization." Elena stepped forward, drawing on her military training to remain calm in this unprecedented situation. "This is Commander Elena Rodriguez of Human Mining Station Omega-7. We were not aware that this region of space was claimed by any civilization. Our surveys indicated this area was uninhabited." High Admiral Zexthon's expression remained cold and dismissive. "Your primitive survey methods are irrelevant. The Vortani Empire has claimed this region for 3 of your centuries. Your presence here constitutes an invasion of sovereign territory." Dr. Thompson moved closer to Elena, whispering urgently in her ear. "Elena, if their civilization has been spacefaring for centuries, their technology could be far more advanced than ours. We need to proceed very carefully." Elena nodded slightly, then addressed the alien admiral again. Hi, Admiral Zexthan. Humanity had no knowledge of your territorial claims. We are willing to negotiate a peaceful resolution to this situation. Perhaps we can establish formal diplomatic relations between our species. The alien's laugh was harsh and mechanical. Negotiate? You misunderstand your position, human. The Vortani Empire does not negotiate with primitive species that stumble into our territory. You will cease all operations immediately and abandon this region of space. Elena felt her military instincts taking over. Years of experience in hostile negotiations had taught her to recognize when diplomacy was failing. Hi, Admiral. We have established a significant operation here. Our people have invested considerable resources in this mining facility. Surely we can find a mutually beneficial arrangement. Your investments are irrelevant, Zexthon replied sharply. The crystals you have discovered belong to the Vortani Empire. They are sacred to our civilization, and their removal by primitive aliens is an act of desecration. Marcus stepped forward, unable to contain his scientific curiosity. Hi, Admiral. Perhaps we could share our research on the crystals. Human science might offer insights that could benefit both our civilizations. Zexthan's eyes fixed on the scientist with obvious disdain. Human science is centuries behind Vortani knowledge. Your primitive understanding of these crystals is an insult to their sacred nature. You will return all extracted materials and abandon this territory within one of your solar days. Elena realized that peaceful resolution was becoming impossible. The alien's attitude made it clear that the Vortani Empire viewed humanity as inferior beings with no rights to consideration. Hi, Admiral, we need more time to evacuate our personnel and equipment. 1 day is insufficient for a safe withdrawal. The timeline is not negotiable, Zexthan stated coldly. Any human vessels remaining in this territory after the deadline will be destroyed without warning. The attack. The communication ended abruptly, leaving Elena staring at a blank screen. Around the command center, her staff looked to her for guidance. The weight of command had never felt heavier as she realized that humanity's first contact with an alien civilization was rapidly escalating toward conflict. Lieutenant Kim, send an immediate priority message to Earth Command, Elena ordered. Include all recordings of our conversation with the Vortani Empire and our analysis of the crystal deposits. They need to know what we're facing. Lieutenant Kim's fingers flew across her console. Message transmitted, Commander. At current communication speeds, Earth should receive our report in approximately 6 hours. Elena turned to Dr. Thompson. Marcus, I need you to prepare a complete analysis of the crystal samples for transmission to Earth. If the Vortani consider these materials sacred, our scientists need to understand why. Marcus nodded and hurried toward his laboratory. Elena then activated the station-wide communication system to address all personnel. This is Commander Rodriguez speaking to all station personnel. We have made contact with an alien civilization that claims territorial rights over this region of space. We are currently attempting to resolve this situation diplomatically, but all personnel should prepare for possible evacuation procedures. The next several hours passed in tense preparation. Elena coordinated with her department heads to plan an orderly withdrawal while hoping that Earth Command would respond with instructions or support. The mining operations were suspended, and non-essential personnel began packing critical equipment and research materials. Captain Rex Morgan arrived at the station aboard his cargo vessel, the Steady Prophet, for his regular supply run. Rex was a veteran of the Merchant Marine who had been running supplies to remote mining operations for over a decade. His ship was designed for cargo capacity rather than speed or combat, but it was reliable and had never failed to complete a delivery. Elena, what's all the commotion about? Rex asked as he docked his ship at the station's loading bay. My communication officer picked up some strange chatter about aliens. Elena briefed Rex on the situation with the Vortani Empire. The captain's expression grew increasingly serious as he learned about the territorial dispute and the deadline that was rapidly approaching. Rex, I need you to take a full load of our most critical research materials and personnel back to Earth immediately, Elena said. If this situation goes badly, humanity needs to know what we've discovered here. Rex nodded without hesitation. My ship can carry about 200 people along with cargo. We should prioritize the research data and your key scientific personnel. As Rex's crew began loading critical materials onto the Steady Prophet, Elena received an alarming report from Lieutenant Kim. Commander, our long-range sensors are detecting multiple alien vessels approaching our position. They appear to be warships based on their energy signatures. Elena rushed to the sensor display, studying the incoming formation. 5 large vessels were approaching the mining station at high speed. Their design was sleek and aggressive, clearly built for warfare rather than exploration or trade. "Time to arrival?" Elena asked. "Approximately 4 hours, Commander," Lieutenant Kim replied. "They're maintaining formation and haven't responded to our communication attempts." Elena made a difficult decision. All non-essential personnel will evacuate on Captain Morgan's ship immediately. Essential crew will remain to operate the station's defensive systems and continue transmitting data to Earth. Rex's cargo ship departed the station 3 hours before the Vortani warships arrived. Elena watched from the command center as the steady Prophet accelerated away from the asteroid belt, carrying nearly 200 of her people toward safety. The Vortani fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a precision that spoke of advanced technology and military discipline. The 5 warships took positions around the mining station, their weapon systems clearly visible on Elena's tactical displays. High Admiral Zex Thon appeared on the communication screen again, his expression showing no emotion. "Human Commander, your deadline has expired. You have failed to evacuate this territory as ordered." Elena stood straight, drawing on her military bearing. "High Admiral, we are in the process of evacuation. Our cargo ship has already departed with most of our personnel. We need additional time to safely remove the remaining crew." "The time for evacuation has ended," Zexathon replied coldly. "Your continued presence is an act of defiance against the Vortani Empire. We will now demonstrate the consequences of opposing our authority." Without warning, the Vortani warships opened fire on Captain Morgan's cargo vessel. The steady Prophet was still within sensor range, accelerating toward the edge of the system when energy beams struck its hull. Elena watched in horror as the cargo ship's shields failed and hull breaches began venting atmosphere into space. "No!" Elena shouted at the screen. "That ship is carrying civilians. They pose no threat to your empire." Zekisthen's expression remained unchanged. "All humans in this territory are trespassers. The fate of your cargo ship demonstrates the price of defying Vortani authority." The steady Prophet tried to maneuver away from the attacking warships, but the alien vessels were too fast and too powerful. Elena watched helplessly as the ship carrying nearly 200 of her people was systematically destroyed. There were no survivors. The warning. Elena felt rage building in her chest as she watched the debris field that had once been Rex Morgan's ship. The Vortani had murdered innocent civilians who were attempting to leave the disputed territory. This wasn't territorial enforcement, it was cold-blooded slaughter. "High Admiral Zexthan," Elena said, her voice steady despite the fury she felt. "You have just committed an act of war against humanity. Those were non-combatants attempting to evacuate as you demanded." The alien admiral seemed amused by her words. "War? Your primitive species does not have the capability to wage war against the Vortani Empire. What you witnessed was simply the elimination of trespassers who ignored our territorial boundaries." Elena looked around her command center at the remaining crew members. Dr. Thompson had returned from his laboratory, his face pale with shock at witnessing the destruction of the cargo ship. Lieutenant Kim was maintaining communication systems while fighting back tears for the friends they had just lost. "Commander," Lieutenant Kim reported quietly, "we're receiving a response from Earth Command. They're ordering us to evacuate immediately and avoid engagement with the alien forces." Elena read the message from Earth Command. The response was predictable. Humanity's military forces were scattered across dozens of star systems, and Earth could not provide immediate support to a remote mining operation. The message concluded with orders to preserve human lives and avoid actions that might escalate the conflict. But Elena realized that the conflict had already escalated beyond any possibility of peaceful resolution. The Vortani had shown their true nature by murdering innocent civilians. They viewed humans as inferior beings with no right to exist in what they considered their territory. "Lieutenant Kim, open a secure channel to Earth Command," Elena ordered. "Maximum encryption and priority transmission." Elena stood before the communication console, knowing that her next words might determine humanity's response to its first contact with an alien civilization. She thought about Captain Morgan and the nearly 200 people who had died simply for being in the wrong place when a superior alien force decided to assert its dominance. "This is Commander Elena Rodriguez of Mining Station Omega-7, transmitting emergency intelligence to Earth Command and the United Earth Government," Elena began. "Humanity has made first contact with an alien civilization calling itself the Vortani Empire. This contact has resulted in the unprovoked destruction of the civilian cargo vessel Steady Prophet and the murder of 193 innocent human beings. Elena paused, choosing her words carefully. The Vortani Empire considers humanity to be a primitive species unworthy of basic rights or considerations. They have demonstrated advanced military technology and a willingness to use overwhelming force against civilian targets. High Admiral Zexithan, their military commander, has made it clear that they view human life as expendable. The station shook as Vortani weapons began targeting the mining facility's defensive systems. Elena continued her transmission as sparks flew from damaged control panels around the command center. Earth Command, you need to understand that this is not a territorial dispute that can be resolved through negotiation. The Vortani Empire operates under the philosophy that might makes right. They will not respect human claims to any territory, and they will not hesitate to eliminate human populations that they consider inconvenient. Another barrage of alien weapons fire struck the station, causing the lights to flicker and the gravity generators to fluctuate. Elena grabbed the communication console to steady herself as she continued. I'm transmitting all data we've collected on Vortani technology, military capabilities, and cultural attitudes. Use this information to prepare humanity's defenses. The crystals we discovered here appear to be of significant importance to their civilization, but they're willing to destroy entire human settlements to maintain control over these resources. Dr. Thompson appeared beside Elena, carrying a data storage device containing all their research. Elena, the data transfer is complete. Earth will have everything we've learned about the crystals and the Vortani technology. Elena nodded, then continued her final transmission. Earth Command, the Vortani have made a critical error in their assessment of humanity. They believe that our compassion for innocent life makes us weak. They think that our desire for peaceful coexistence makes us easy targets for conquest. The station's hull began to crack under the sustained alien bombardment. Elena could hear the sound of rushing air as atmosphere began leaking into space. She knew they had only minutes before the station's life support systems failed completely. They're wrong about humanity, Elena said firmly. We don't fight because we enjoy violence. We fight because we protect our own. They've given us no choice but to show them what humans are truly capable of when our families and friends are threatened. Elena looked at her remaining crew members, seeing determination in their eyes despite the desperate situation. Tell Earth that the Vortani Empire has chosen to make this a war of extinction. They've demonstrated that they will murder innocent humans without hesitation. Now they'll learn what happens when humans decide that a threat must be eliminated completely. The station's emergency evacuation alarm began sounding as the hull integrity reached critical levels. Elena made her final transmission to Earth. This is Commander Elena Rodriguez signing off. Remember the crew of the Steady Prophet. Remember the people who died here today. Remember that when aliens threaten human families, we don't negotiate. We don't surrender. We make sure that threat never endangers another human life. Elena activated the station's emergency beacon that would transmit all their collected data back to Earth on a narrow beam signal that the Vortani were unlikely to detect. As the command center's atmosphere rushed out into space, she looked one last time at the alien warships that surrounded their dying station. The Vortani Empire had just made the worst mistake in their civilization's history. They had shown humanity exactly what kind of enemy they were facing, and they had given humans the motivation to do whatever was necessary to eliminate that threat. The warning had been sent. Earth would know what was coming, and humanity would be ready. Mining Station Omega-7 exploded in a brilliant flash of light, taking with it the last evidence of humanity's first contact with the Vortani Empire. But the message had gotten through and in the depths of space. The data beacon continued transmitting its precious cargo of information toward Earth. The Vortani had ignored every principle of civilized first contact. They had chosen violence over diplomacy, murder over negotiation. Now they would learn that some warnings should never be ignored, and some species should never be underestimated. The war was coming, and humanity would be ready. The gathering storm. The message arrives. Admiral Jessica Kane stood in the Situation Room deep within Earth Defense Headquarters, studying the holographic display that showed humanity's current military deployments across known space. At 52 years old, she had dedicated her entire adult life to protecting human colonies and trade routes from pirates, corporate militias, and the occasional territorial dispute between human factions. Nothing in her experience had prepared her for the intelligence report that lay before her on the briefing table. The emergency session had been called at 0300 hours when Commander Rodriguez's final transmission from mining station Omega-7 reached Earth. President Chen sat at the head of the conference table, her usually composed expression showing the strain of processing humanity's first contact with a hostile alien civilization. Around the table, the most senior military and civilian leaders of Earth tried to comprehend the magnitude of the threat they were facing. General Robert Thorne, the gruff veteran who served as Earth's chief military strategist, broke the silence that had followed the playback of Elena Rodriguez's final message. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to face facts. An alien empire with superior technology has just declared war on humanity by murdering 200 innocent civilians. President Chen leaned forward, her fingers steepled as she considered the implications. General Thorne, do we have any assessment of their total military capabilities? Commander Rodriguez mentioned 5 warships, but that could represent a tiny fraction of their total fleet. Admiral Kane activated the holographic display, showing the technical analysis that Earth scientists had extracted from the mining station's sensor data. Based on the energy signatures and weapon capabilities observed, the Vortani warships are approximately 50% more advanced than our current military vessels. However, their technology appears to be focused on overwhelming firepower rather than tactical flexibility. Dr. Sarah Mills, Earth's leading xenobiologist, had been quietly reviewing the cultural analysis data. Admiral Kane, I'm more concerned about their stated philosophy than their technology. High Admiral Zex Thon made it clear that the Vortani Empire views humanity as a primitive species unworthy of basic rights. This isn't a territorial dispute we can resolve through negotiation. General Thorne stood and began pacing around the conference room. The question is how many ships they can bring to bear against our colonies. Earth's defense fleet has approximately 300 vessels spread across 40 star systems. If the Vortani can field a fleet of similar size with superior technology, we're facing a war of extinction. President Chen activated her communication console to address the Director of Colonial Affairs. Director Walsh, I need a complete assessment of our most vulnerable colonies. If the Vortani are expanding their territorial claims, which human settlements are most likely to be targeted? Director Walsh's voice came through the speakers with obvious concern. Madam President, we have 17 mining operations and research stations operating in regions similar to the Kepler Belt. Additionally, our newest colonies on the frontier have limited defensive capabilities. If the Vortani Empire is expanding, nearly 30% of human settlements could be at risk. Admiral Kane felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. As the senior military officer present, the defense of humanity would ultimately depend on her strategic decisions. Madam President, I recommend immediate implementation of Emergency Protocol 7. We need to consolidate our forces and begin evacuating the most vulnerable civilian populations. Emergency Protocol 7 had been developed as a theoretical response to an existential threat to human civilization. It authorized the military to commandeer civilian vessels, implement martial law in threatened regions, and redirect all available resources toward defensive preparations. Admiral Kane, how long would it take to implement full mobilization? President Chen asked. Kane consulted her tactical assessments. With immediate authorization, we can begin moving ships toward priority positions within 72 hours. Complete mobilization of all available forces would require approximately 2 weeks. General Thorne stopped pacing and faced the group. 2 weeks might be too long. If the Vortani are as aggressive as Commander Rodriguez indicated, they might not wait for us to prepare our defenses. As if responding to the general's concerns, the emergency communication system activated. Captain Lisa Park's voice filled the room as she transmitted from her reconnaissance vessel, the Swift Arrow, operating on the frontier. Earth Command, this is Captain Park reporting from the Tau Ceti system. We've detected massive energy signatures consistent with faster-than-light travel. Multiple large vessels have entered the system and are approaching the civilian colony on Tau Ceti Prime. Admiral Kane immediately connected to Captain Park's communication feed. Captain Park, this is Admiral Kane. Can you identify the approaching vessels? Admiral, the ship configurations match the technical specifications from the mining station Omega-7 incident. We're looking at approximately 12 Vortani warships moving in attack formation toward the colony. President Chen stood abruptly. Captain Park, how many civilians are on Tau Ceti Prime? Approximately 50,000, Madam President. The colony has no military defenses beyond a small security force equipped for law enforcement, not warfare. Admiral Kane felt her worst fears being realized. The Vortani Empire wasn't waiting to assess human capabilities or attempt further negotiations. They were immediately escalating to attacks on civilian populations. "Captain Park, what's your ship's current position and capabilities?" Kane asked. "Admiral, the Swift Arrow is a reconnaissance vessel armed with light weapons. We're no match for 12 Vortani warships, but we're in a position to observe and relay intelligence back to Earth." General Thorne moved to the tactical display, studying the positions of human forces in the Tau Ceti region. "Admiral, our nearest combat vessels are 18 hours away at maximum speed. By the time they reach Tau Ceti Prime, the Vortani will have completed whatever they're planning to do." Kane made a command decision that would define humanity's response to the alien threat. "Captain Park, I'm authorizing you to make contact with the Vortani fleet. Transmit a warning that Tau Ceti Prime is a civilian colony with no military significance. Offer to facilitate the evacuation of human personnel if they claim territorial rights over the system." "Understood, Admiral. Attempting to contact the Vortani fleet now." The pattern emerges. The next several hours brought a stream of reports that painted a clear picture of Vortani intentions. Captain Park's attempt to negotiate for the civilians on Tau Ceti Prime was ignored completely. The alien warships began bombardment of the colony from orbit, systematically destroying every human settlement on the planet. Captain Park transmitted continuous updates as she watched the destruction unfold. "Earth Command, the Vortani are not targeting military installations because there aren't any. They're deliberately destroying civilian infrastructure, schools, hospitals, residential areas. They're eliminating anything that shows human presence." Admiral Kane listened to the reports with growing horror. The Vortani weren't just claiming territory, they were conducting systematic extermination of human populations. "Captain Park, are you detecting any evacuation attempts? Any survivors?" Kane asked, hoping for some small piece of good news. "Negative, Admiral. The Vortani are targeting escape pods and emergency shelters. They're not trying to drive humans away from their territory. They're trying to eliminate every trace of human existence in the system." President Chen had been listening to the reports while coordinating with other government departments. "Admiral Kane, we're receiving similar reports from 3 other frontier colonies. The Vortani Empire is conducting simultaneous attacks on human settlements across a front spanning 12 light-years." General Thorne was updating the tactical display with real-time intelligence from the various attack sites. "This is clearly a coordinated military campaign designed for maximum psychological impact. They want to demonstrate that human colonies are defenseless against their forces." Dr. Mills had been analyzing the pattern of attacks. "The Vortani are being selective about their targets. They're focusing on isolated colonies with limited communication capabilities. They want to eliminate human presence without immediately triggering a massive military response from Earth." Admiral Kane realized that the Vortani strategy was more sophisticated than simple aggression. They're trying to create a situation where Earth has to choose between protecting remaining colonies and attempting to retaliate for the colonies they've already destroyed. Captain Park's voice returned with an urgent update. "Earth Command, the Vortani fleet is finishing their bombardment of Tau Ceti Prime. The planet's surface shows no signs of human life remaining. However, I'm detecting the alien ships beginning to land ground forces." "Ground forces?" Kane asked. "For what purpose? They've already eliminated the human population." "Admiral, it appears they're establishing some kind of permanent installation. Large-scale construction equipment is being deployed to the planet's surface." The implications became clear to everyone in the Situation Room. The Vortani weren't just eliminating human colonies, they were immediately replacing them with their own infrastructure. President Chen activated the emergency communication system to address the nation. "My fellow humans, I'm speaking to you during humanity's darkest hour. We have confirmed that an alien empire is conducting systematic attacks on our frontier colonies. As of this moment, 4 human settlements totaling over 100,000 civilians have been completely destroyed." Kane listened as the president continued her address. "I am immediately authorizing Emergency Protocol 7. All civilian vessels will be subject to military requisition. All frontier colonies will begin immediate evacuation procedures. All available military forces will be consolidated for the defense of human space." General Thorne was already coordinating with military bases across Earth and the core human systems. "All fleet commanders, this is General Thorne with immediate deployment orders. Implement Defense Pattern Alpha. All vessels will converge on Earth for strategic coordination within 96 hours. Humanity responds. The next week saw the greatest mobilization in human history. Civilian cargo ships were hastily converted into troop transports and supply vessels. Orbital shipyards that had been producing commercial vessels switched to military production. Most importantly, colonies throughout human space began sending their best and brightest young people to serve in the expanding defense fleet. Admiral Kane established her command center aboard the battleship Indomitable, the most advanced warship in Earth's fleet. From here, she coordinated the integration of regular military forces with the thousands of civilian volunteers who had enlisted to defend their species. Captain Maria Santos, one of the most experienced combat pilots in the Earth Defense Fleet, reported to Kane's flagship with a squadron of volunteer pilots. "Admiral, we've got civilian cargo pilots, racing enthusiasts, and even some retired military personnel who've volunteered to crew fighter craft. They're not trained for military operations, but they're motivated by what happened to the frontier colonies." Kane reviewed the pilot evaluations that Captain Santos provided. "Captain, motivation is important, but these people will be facing technology that's more advanced than anything we've encountered. How quickly can we train them for combat operations?" "Admiral, I recommend focusing on their existing skills rather than trying to teach them completely new techniques. Most of these volunteers know how to handle spacecraft in dangerous situations. We can build on that foundation." General Thorne joined the discussion via communication link from Earth. "Admiral Kane, our intelligence department has completed analysis of the Vortani tactics observed during the colony attacks. They appear to rely on overwhelming firepower and superior technology rather than complex maneuvering or tactical flexibility." Kane studied the tactical analysis. "General, are you suggesting that we can counter their technological advantage through superior tactics?" "Exactly, Admiral. The Vortani demonstrated their capabilities by attacking defenseless civilian targets. We don't know how they'll perform against an organized military response that uses unconventional strategies." Kane felt a spark of hope for the first time since the crisis began. "General, what do you recommend?" "We use our knowledge of human space to our advantage. Fight them in locations where we can control the tactical environment. Force them to respond to our strategies rather than implementing their own." Dr. Mills had been analyzing the cultural data from Commander Rodriguez's final transmission. "Admiral Kane, I think there's another factor we need to consider. The Vortani appear to view warfare as a demonstration of superior technology and firepower. They might not be prepared for enemies who fight with what they would consider dishonorable tactics." Kane considered this insight. Human military doctrine had always emphasized adaptability and creative problem-solving over technological superiority. During conflicts with pirates and corporate militias, human forces had consistently succeeded by using unconventional strategies. "Dr. Mills, are you suggesting that the Vortani might underestimate human tactical capabilities the same way they underestimated human determination?" "Precisely, Admiral. They've concluded that humanity is primitive based on our technology levels. They probably assume that our military thinking is equally primitive." Captain Santos was reviewing the sensor data from the colony attacks. "Admiral, I noticed that the Vortani fleets maintain very rigid formations during their attacks. They don't seem to adapt their positioning based on changing circumstances." Kane pulled up the tactical displays showing Vortani fleet movements. "Captain Santos, you're right. Their formations are mathematically precise but tactically inflexible. They're fighting like a technology demonstration rather than an actual war." General Thorne's voice carried new confidence as he continued the analysis. "Admiral, this gives us significant advantages. Human pilots are trained to adapt to changing conditions and exploit enemy weaknesses. If the Vortani rely on predetermined tactical patterns, we can anticipate their movements and counter them." Kane felt the pieces of a strategy beginning to form in her mind. "General, how long until our forces are fully consolidated?" 72 hours, Admiral. We'll have approximately 400 vessels available for operations, including the converted civilian ships." Kane made her decision. "General Thorne, Captain Santos, Dr. Mills, I want you to work together on developing unconventional tactical approaches that exploit what we've learned about Vortani limitations. We're not going to fight them the way they expect to be fought." The ultimatum. 3 days later, Admiral Kane received the communication that she had been expecting since the first colony was attacked. High Admiral Zexthon appeared on the main screen of the Indomitable, his pale blue features showing the same cold arrogance that Commander Rodriguez had encountered. "Primitive human military commander," Zexthon began without introduction. "I am High Admiral Zexthon of the Vortani Empire. Your species has witnessed the consequences of opposing our territorial expansion." Kane stood before the communication console, flanked by her senior officers. She had spent hours preparing for this moment, knowing that her response would set the tone for everything that followed. Hi, Admiral Zexthan. I am Admiral Jessica Kane of the Earth Defense Fleet. You have committed acts of genocide against human civilian populations. This constitutes an act of war against humanity. Zexathan's expression showed what might have been amusement. War? Your primitive species lacks the capability to wage war against the Vortani Empire. What you have witnessed is simply the reclamation of territory that rightfully belongs to our civilization. Kane felt the same rage that Commander Rodriguez must have experienced, but she kept her voice level and professional. Hi, Admiral, you have murdered over 100,000 innocent human beings, children, families, people who posed no threat to your empire. We will not allow these crimes to go unanswered. Your emotional attachment to inferior members of your species demonstrates why humans are unsuited for expansion among the stars, Zexthan replied coldly. Advanced civilizations understand that the strong must rule and the weak must submit or be eliminated. Kane looked at the tactical display showing the positions of human and Vortani forces throughout the frontier region. Hi, Admiral, you have made a fundamental error in your assessment of humanity. You believe that our compassion makes us weak. You're about to learn how wrong you are. Zexthan's image leaned forward slightly, perhaps showing the first sign of genuine interest in the conversation. You speak of strength, yet your primitive vessels flee from our fleets. Your colonies surrender without resistance. What strength do you imagine your species possesses? Kane smiled, and for the first time since the crisis began, she felt confident about humanity's chances. Hi, Admiral. The strength you're about to discover is something your empire has never encountered. We don't fight because we enjoy violence. We fight because we protect our own, and when our families are threatened, humans become something that no alien civilization has ever faced. Empty words from a primitive species, Zexthan dismissed. The Vortani Empire gives humanity one final opportunity to avoid complete extinction. Withdraw all human presence from the frontier regions immediately. Submit to Vortani authority over resource extraction and territorial claims. Accept your position as a subject species under our guidance. Kane looked around at her officers, seeing determination in every face. Captain Santos was ready to lead fighter squadrons into battle against superior technology. General Thorne was prepared to coordinate complex tactical operations across multiple star systems. Dr. Mills was ready to use her understanding of Vortani psychology to predict their responses. Hi, Admiral Zexthan, Kane said firmly. Humanity rejects your ultimatum. We reject your authority. We reject your belief that strength gives you the right to murder innocent people. Zexathan's expression hardened. Then you have chosen extinction. The full might of the Vortani Empire will descend upon your worlds. Your species will learn what happens to primitives who defy advanced civilizations. Kane stepped closer to the communication console. Hi, Admiral. You've made the same mistake that every enemy of humanity has made throughout our history. You've assumed that technology is more important than determination. You've assumed that superior firepower is more important than superior tactics. You've assumed that individual strength is more important than unity of purpose. The communication remained open as Kane delivered her final response to the Vortani ultimatum. You murdered innocent human children because you thought we were too weak to fight back. You destroyed families because you thought we were too primitive to threaten your empire. You committed genocide because you thought humans would surrender rather than face extinction. Kane looked directly into the camera, knowing that her words were being recorded for transmission throughout both human and Vortani space. Hi, Admiral Zexthan. You're about to learn that some species should never be underestimated. You're about to discover what happens when humans stop being civilized and start being survivors. You're about to face the consequences of ignoring the warning that Commander Elena Rodriguez died trying to deliver. Zexthan ended the communication abruptly, but Kane continued speaking for the recording that would be transmitted to every human colony and Earth itself. The Vortani Empire has chosen war. They've chosen to make this a conflict of extinction. We accept their choice, but they've made a critical error in their calculations. They think this war will end with human surrender or human extinction. They're wrong. This war will end with every human in the galaxy united in a single purpose, ensuring that no alien civilization ever again makes the mistake of threatening human families. Kane turned to her officers as the communication ended. General Thorne, begin implementation of Operation Righteous Fury. Captain Santos, prepare all fighter squadrons for immediate deployment. Dr. Mills, I want psychological warfare protocols ready for transmission to Vortani forces. The gathering storm was about to break, and humanity was ready to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of when their survival was at stake. When humans fight back, the fleet departs. Admiral Jessica Kane stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as the largest fleet in human history prepared to depart Earth's orbital space. 400 vessels stretched across the solar system in perfect formation, representing every ship that humanity could bring to bear against the Vortani Empire. Converted cargo haulers flew alongside military destroyers. Civilian racing craft had been modified to carry military-grade weapons. Even luxury yachts had been equipped with sensor arrays and communication equipment to support the fleet operations. Captain Sarah Mitchell, the commander of Fighter Squadron Alpha, reported from her modified interceptor. Admiral Kane, all fighter wings are ready for departure. We've integrated the civilian pilots into our tactical formations, and I have to say, their unconventional flying styles might actually give us an advantage against Vortani formations. Kane reviewed the final tactical assessments on her command console. General Thorne had worked around the clock with the fleet's strategic planning team to develop Operation Righteous Fury, a coordinated assault designed to exploit every weakness they had identified in Vortani military doctrine. Captain Mitchell, remember that we're not trying to match the Vortani ship for ship in a traditional battle, Kane said. Our advantage lies in unpredictability and tactical flexibility. Make them react to our strategies instead of implementing their own. Commander Torres, the fleet's tactical coordinator, activated the three-dimensional battle map that showed their destination. Admiral, our target is the Vortani staging area in the Kepler Belt where they first encountered our mining station. Intelligence indicates they've established a major military base using the crystal deposits as a power source. Kane studied the tactical situation. The Vortani had chosen to build their forward operating base in the same region where they had murdered Commander Rodriguez and her crew. It was strategically logical, but it also meant that humanity's counterattack would begin at the site where this war had started. Dr. Sarah Mills joined the command group, carrying the psychological warfare analysis that would be crucial to their strategy. Admiral, based on our study of Vortani behavior patterns, they're expecting us to either surrender completely or mount a desperate frontal assault. They're not prepared for a coordinated campaign that targets their operational assumptions. Kane felt the weight of command as she prepared to give the order that would commit humanity to its first interstellar war. Every person on every ship in the fleet was depending on her tactical decisions. More importantly, every human civilian throughout the galaxy was depending on this fleet to stop the Vortani expansion before more colonies were destroyed. All ships, this is Admiral Kane, she announced over the fleet communication system. Today we begin humanity's response to alien aggression. The Vortani Empire believes that superior technology gives them the right to murder innocent humans. They believe that our compassion makes us weak. They believe that we will surrender rather than fight for our survival. Kane paused, looking at the tactical display showing the vast formation of human vessels. They're wrong about humanity. We don't fight because we enjoy violence. We fight because we protect our own. We don't surrender when our families are threatened. We become something that no alien civilization has ever encountered before. The fleet began moving toward the hyperspace jump point that would take them to the Kepler Belt. Kane continued her address to the crews who would be risking their lives in the coming battle. Remember Commander Elena Rodriguez and the crew of mining station Omega-7. Remember Captain Rex Morgan and the passengers aboard the Steady Prophet. Remember the 100,000 civilians murdered on our frontier colonies. We're not just fighting for territory or resources. We're fighting to ensure that no alien empire ever again makes the mistake of thinking that human lives are expendable. The battle begins. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler Belt, immediately deploying into the complex formation that General Thorne had designed specifically to counter Vortani tactics. Instead of maintaining the rigid formations that characterized alien military doctrine, the human ships spread across a wide area and began moving in seemingly random patterns. Captain Mitchell led her fighter squadrons in a reconnaissance sweep of the asteroid field, locating the Vortani base that had been constructed around the crystal deposits. Admiral Kane, we found their installation. It's massive. They've converted the entire asteroid cluster into a fortified military complex. Kane studied the sensor data as it streamed back from the fighter reconnaissance. The Vortani had indeed built an impressive facility, but their construction followed the same rigid patterns that characterized their fleet formations. Captain Mitchell, do you see any defensive positions that adapt to changing attack vectors? Negative, Admiral. Their defensive weapons are positioned in geometric patterns that provide maximum coverage against conventional attacks, but they've left gaps that could be exploited by non-standard approach vectors. Commander Torres was coordinating with the fleet's intelligence specialists to analyze the Vortani-based design. Admiral, their defensive philosophy appears to be based on overwhelming any direct assault. They're not prepared for attacks that come from multiple directions simultaneously. Kane felt the tactical situation beginning to favor humanity's unconventional approach. Commander Torres, implement attack pattern Delta. All ships will engage the Vortani base from different vectors simultaneously. Force them to respond to multiple threats instead of concentrating their firepower. The human fleet began its assault with a complexity that the Vortani had never encountered. Fighter squadrons attacked from above and below the asteroid field while capital ships approached from multiple sides. Converted cargo vessels used their superior maneuverability to duck between asteroids and attack defensive positions from unexpected angles. High Admiral Zexton appeared on Kane's communication screen, his usual composure showing signs of strain. Human Commander, your primitive tactics will not save you from Vortani superiority. Our technology will overcome your desperate maneuvers. Kane smiled as she watched her tactical display showing successful strikes against Vortani defensive positions. High Admiral, you're still thinking about this as a technology demonstration. We're fighting a war. The Vortani response was exactly what General Thorne had predicted. Their warships moved into rigid defensive formations around their base, concentrating their firepower against what they perceived to be the primary threat. This left them vulnerable to the secondary and tertiary attacks that were coming from directions they hadn't anticipated. Captain Mitchell's fighter squadrons exploited these gaps with devastating effectiveness. Admiral Kane, the Vortani fighters are trying to engage us in individual combat instead of coordinated group tactics. Our pilots with civilian backgrounds are actually outmaneuvering their military craft. Kane watched as human fighters weaved through the asteroid field, using terrain that the Vortani couldn't navigate effectively. The alien fighters were faster and more heavily armed, but they couldn't match the intuitive flying skills of humans who had learned to pilot spacecraft in chaotic environments. Turning the tide. As the battle continued, a pattern began to emerge that changed Kane's understanding of the conflict. The Vortani were indeed technologically superior, but their entire military doctrine was based on fighting other alien civilizations that followed similar tactical principles. They had never encountered an enemy that treated warfare as a creative problem-solving exercise rather than a demonstration of technological supremacy. Commander Torres reported from his tactical station. Admiral, we're detecting signs of confusion in the Vortani command structure. Their ships are requesting new orders instead of adapting to changing battlefield conditions. Kane realized that this represented a fundamental difference between human and Vortani military thinking. Human commanders were trained to make independent decisions based on changing circumstances. The Vortani appeared to depend on centralized command authority for tactical adjustments. Commander Torres, focus our attacks on their command and communication systems. If we can disrupt their ability to coordinate responses, their technological advantage becomes meaningless. Dr. Mills joined the tactical discussion with psychological analysis that proved crucial to their strategy. Admiral, the Vortani are showing signs of genuine confusion about human capabilities. They expected either surrender or a conventional military response. Our unconventional tactics are outside their cultural understanding of warfare. Kane studied the battle development on her tactical display. Human losses were significantly lighter than predicted, while Vortani defensive systems were failing faster than their tactical models had suggested. Dr. Mills, are you saying that we're not just winning tactically, but psychologically disrupting their entire approach to the conflict? Exactly, Admiral. The Vortani built their empire by conquering species that fought according to predictable patterns. They've never faced enemies who treat each engagement as a unique problem requiring creative solutions. Captain Mitchell's voice came through the communication system with excitement that was unusual for the professional pilot. Admiral Kane, you need to see this. The Vortani fighters are actually retreating from individual engagements even when they have superior firepower. They seem confused by our pilots' unpredictable maneuvering. Kane felt a surge of hope as she realized that humanity's greatest weakness, according to Vortani assessment, Their tendency to think creatively rather than follow rigid protocols was actually proving to be their greatest strength in this conflict. All ships, this is Admiral Kane. The enemy is showing signs of tactical confusion. Continue implementing unconventional strategies. Make them respond to our initiatives instead of executing their own plans. The tide of battle began to turn decisively in humanity's favor. Vortani defensive positions that had been designed to withstand conventional assaults were systematically dismantled by attacks that came from unexpected directions. Their fighters, despite superior technology, were being outmaneuvered by human pilots who had learned to fly in chaotic civilian environments. Most importantly, the rigid command structure that had made the Vortani Empire efficient in conquering other alien civilizations was proving to be a liability against enemies who didn't follow predictable patterns. The decisive moment. High Admiral Zexthon made a final attempt to assert Vortani superiority by challenging Admiral Kane to what he called honorable single combat between their respective flagships. Kane realized that this represented the alien commander's attempt to return the battle to familiar parameters where technological superiority would determine the outcome. High Admiral Zexthon, Kane replied. You still don't understand what you're fighting. This isn't a contest between technologies or individual commanders. This is a war between philosophies. Kane turned to her crew as she prepared to explain humanity's approach to warfare. The Vortani Empire builds its strength on the belief that the strong have the right to dominate the weak. They conquered other species by demonstrating superior technology and firepower. She activated the fleet communication system so that every human ship could hear her words. Humanity builds its strength on the belief that we protect our own. We don't fight to dominate other species. We fight to ensure that no one can threaten human families with impunity. Instead of accepting the single combat challenge, Kane ordered a coordinated assault on the Vortani flagship that demonstrated the difference between their respective approaches to conflict. Rather than one ship against one ship, the human fleet concentrated the efforts of dozens of vessels to systematically disable the alien command vessel. The Vortani flagship, despite its superior technology, could not withstand attacks from multiple directions simultaneously. Its defenses had been designed to dominate individual opponents, not to survive coordinated assaults from enemies who shared a common purpose. As the Vortani flagship's systems began failing, High Admiral Zexthon appeared on Kane's communication screen one final time. His composure had completely broken, replaced by something that might have been fear. "This is impossible," he said, his voice showing shock at the battle's outcome. "The Vortani Empire has never been defeated by primitive species. Our technology is superior, our weapons are more powerful, our experience spans centuries of successful conquest." Kane looked at the alien commander with something approaching pity. "High Admiral, you made the same mistake that every enemy of humanity has made throughout our history. You assumed that technology was more important than determination. You assumed that individual strength was more important than unity of purpose." The tactical display showed Vortani forces throughout the system beginning to retreat as news of their flagship's defeat spread through their fleet. Kane continued her final communication with the alien commander. "You murdered innocent human children because you thought we were too civilized to fight back effectively. You destroyed families because you thought our compassion made us weak. You committed genocide because you thought humans would surrender rather than face extinction." Kane gestured to the tactical display showing human ships throughout the asteroid field, having achieved complete victory over a technologically superior enemy. "High Admiral Zexthon, you've learned what happens when humans stop being civilized and start being survivors. You've discovered the consequences of ignoring the warning that Commander Elena Rodriguez died trying to deliver. The New Order. The destruction of the Vortani staging area in the Kepler Belt marked the beginning of a systematic campaign that would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Human forces, emboldened by their first victory over advanced alien technology, began pursuing retreating Vortani fleets across multiple star systems. Admiral Kane established her command post in the captured alien base, using Vortani technology to coordinate human operations across an expanding front. The crystal deposits that had originally attracted human attention proved to be even more valuable than Dr. Thompson had predicted, providing power sources that enhanced human military capabilities. Captain Mitchell, now promoted to lead all fighter operations, reported on the pursuit of fleeing Vortani forces. "Admiral Kane, we're detecting Vortani retreat toward their core territorial systems. However, our intelligence indicates that news of their defeat is causing political instability throughout their empire." Kane studied the intelligence reports with growing satisfaction. The Vortani Empire had built its authority on the belief that they were militarily invincible. Their defeat by a primitive species was calling into question the fundamental assumptions that held their civilization together. Dr. Mills provided cultural analysis that explained the broader implications of the human victory. Admiral, the Vortani Empire rules over dozens of conquered species that have been suppressed for centuries. Our defeat of their military forces is inspiring rebellion throughout their territory. Kane realized that humanity's victory over the Vortani was creating opportunities that extended far beyond simple military conquest. Dr. Mills, are you suggesting that we could liberate the species that the Vortani have been oppressing? Exactly, Admiral. The Vortani philosophy is based on the belief that the strong have the right to rule the weak. By defeating them militarily, we've proven that their strength was an illusion. Their subject species are beginning to understand that the Vortani Empire can be overthrown. Commander Torres coordinated with intelligence specialists to develop a comprehensive strategy for dealing with the collapsing Vortani Empire. Admiral Kane, we're receiving communication requests from representatives of 17 different species that have been under Vortani control. They're requesting human assistance in overthrowing their occupiers. Kane faced a decision that would determine humanity's role in galactic civilization. They could simply drive the Vortani away from human territory and focus on defending their own colonies. Alternatively, they could use their military victory to establish a new order based on human principles of protecting the innocent and defending the weak. Commander Torres, schedule meetings with representatives of the oppressed species. We'll evaluate each situation individually, but our general policy will be to support liberation movements that align with human values. Kane activated the Galactic Communication System to address not just human colonies, but any alien civilization within transmission range. This is Admiral Jessica Kane of the Earth Defense Fleet, speaking to all intelligent species in this region of the galaxy. She paused, thinking about Commander Rodriguez and all the innocent people who had died because the Vortani believed that superior technology gave them the right to murder civilians. The Vortani Empire chose to make this a war of extinction when they murdered human families and children. They believed that their technological superiority made them invincible. They believed that their philosophy of domination was the natural order of the galaxy. Kane looked at the tactical display showing human forces in control of former Vortani territory. They were wrong. The natural order of the galaxy is not the domination of the weak by the strong. The natural order is cooperation between species that respect each other's right to exist in peace. She continued her address, knowing that her words were being heard by civilizations throughout the region. Humanity offers a different model for galactic civilization. We don't seek to dominate other species. We seek to protect innocent beings from those who would harm them. We don't claim territory based on superior firepower. We claim the responsibility to ensure that no civilization ever again faces extinction simply because others consider them primitive. The communication continued as Kane established the principles that would guide humanity's expansion into galactic politics. To any species that has suffered under Vortani oppression, we offer our assistance in establishing free governments that respect the rights of all citizens. To any civilization that threatens innocent populations, we offer a warning. Humanity remembers what happens to those who murder children and families. The galaxy transformed. 6 months after the Battle of the Kepler Belt, Admiral Kane stood in the council chamber of New Geneva Station, the administrative center that humanity had established to coordinate relations with the 43 species that had been liberated from Vortani control. The massive space station orbited the former Vortani capital world, which had been transformed from a center of oppression into a symbol of interspecies cooperation. Representatives from dozens of different civilizations worked together in the council chamber, developing policies that protected the rights of all species while maintaining the security necessary to prevent future conflicts. The diversity was remarkable, beings of different sizes, shapes, and physiologies, all united by their shared commitment to preventing another empire like the Vortani from arising. Dr. Mills, now serving as humanity's chief diplomatic advisor, provided Kane with updates on the ongoing transformation of the former Vortani territory. Admiral, the integration process is proceeding better than our most optimistic projections. Species that had been enemies under Vortani rule are working together to rebuild their civilizations. Kane reviewed the reports with satisfaction. The liberation of Vortani territory had revealed the true scope of their empire's crimes against sentient life. Entire species had been enslaved for centuries. Civilizations that had shown artistic or scientific promise had been systematically suppressed to prevent them from developing technologies that might threaten Vortani supremacy. Captain Mitchell, now serving as the military liaison to the new Galactic Protection Council, reported on the security situation. Admiral Kane, we've completed the integration of former Vortani military vessels into the Joint Defense Fleet. The alien crews are adapting well to human tactical doctrine, and their technology is proving valuable for our defensive capabilities. Kane had insisted from the beginning that the new galactic order would not simply replace Vortani domination with human domination. Instead, humanity would serve as the guarantor of a system where all species could develop their potential without fear of conquest or oppression. Captain Mitchell, what's the status of our early warning systems? We need to ensure that no future empire can develop the capability to threaten multiple species simultaneously. Admiral, we've established monitoring stations throughout the region that can detect large-scale military buildups or aggressive expansion by any civilization. More importantly, we've created a communication network that allows threatened species to request assistance immediately. Kane walked to the observation deck that overlooked the former Vortani capital. The planet's surface showed signs of massive reconstruction as liberated species worked together to build new cities based on cooperation, rather than domination. Commander Torres joined Kane at the observation window, carrying reports from the deep space exploration fleets that were now surveying regions beyond former Vortani territory. Admiral, our scout ships have made contact with 17 new civilizations in the past month. Most are eager to establish trade and diplomatic relations. However, 3 species have expressed concern about human military capabilities. Kane expected this reaction. Humanity's defeat of the Vortani Empire had established them as the dominant military force in the known galaxy. Some species worried that humans might eventually become as oppressive as the empire they had replaced. Commander Torres, what measures are we taking to address these concerns? We're implementing the transparency protocols that Dr. Mills recommended. Any species can request observers during our military exercises. We're also establishing the independent oversight committee that will monitor human military activities to ensure we don't exceed our authority as protectors. Kane nodded with approval. The oversight committee had been her idea based on the recognition that power without accountability inevitably led to corruption. If humanity was going to serve as the galaxy's protector, they needed to accept limitations on their own authority. Dr. Mills approached with a communication that would test these principles. Admiral Kane, we're receiving a request for assistance from a civilization in the Andromeda Contact Zone. The hegemony of Keth is apparently conducting systematic extermination of a species they consider inferior. Kane felt the familiar anger that came with reports of genocide, but she also recognized the complexity of the situation. The Andromeda Contact Zone was far beyond the region where humanity had established authority. Intervening there would represent a significant expansion of human responsibility. Dr. Mills, what do we know about the hegemony of Keth? Limited information, Admiral. They appear to be a militaristic civilization with technology comparable to the Vortani Empire. They've been expanding aggressively for several decades, but this is the first report of genocide. Kane studied the tactical implications of intervention in the Andromeda region. It would require a significant portion of humanity's fleet and could potentially involve them in conflicts with unknown alien civilizations. Dr. Mills, what's the assessment of the Galactic Protection Council? Do they support intervention? The Council is divided, Admiral. Some species argue that we have a moral obligation to prevent genocide wherever it occurs. Others worry that expanding our operations too quickly could overextend our capabilities and leave our current territories vulnerable. Kane realized that this decision would establish precedents for humanity's future role in galactic affairs. If they intervened in the Andromeda region, they would be committing to serve as protectors for the entire galaxy. If they declined to intervene, they would be accepting that some genocides were beyond their responsibility. Schedule a full council session for tomorrow, Kane decided. This decision affects all species under our protection, so all species should have a voice in making it. The legacy. The council session that followed became known as the Moment of Choice, when the representatives of 43 liberated species debated humanity's role in galactic civilization. The discussion continued for 18 hours, with passionate arguments on both sides of the intervention question. Ambassador Thektar of the former Vortani subject species known as the Gentle Builders spoke for the intervention faction. Admiral Kane, my people suffered under oppression for 3 centuries before humanity liberated us. We cannot stand by while another species faces extinction simply because they are weak. Ambassador Zarina of the Crystal Shapers argued for caution. We support the principle of protection, but we must be realistic about our capabilities. If we overextend ourselves trying to save everyone, we might lose the ability to protect anyone. Kane listened to the debate, recognizing the wisdom in both positions. Finally, she stood to address the full council. Representatives of the Galactic Protection Council, you've heard arguments that reflect the fundamental question facing our alliance. Are we responsible for protecting only the species in our immediate region, or do we have an obligation to oppose genocide wherever it occurs? Kane activated the holographic display showing the galaxy's known civilizations. 1 year ago, humanity was a minor species that most aliens considered primitive and weak. Today, we're the guarantors of freedom for dozens of civilizations spanning hundreds of star systems. She highlighted the Andromeda contact zone on the display. The hegemony of Keth believes that their superior technology gives them the right to exterminate species they consider inferior. They're making the same mistake that the Vortani Empire made when they murdered human civilians. Kane looked around the council chamber at the representatives of species that had been liberated from oppression. The question is whether we're willing to extend the same protection to distant species that we provide to our current allies. Ambassador Thektar stood to address the council. Admiral Kane, my people vote for intervention. We remember what it felt like to be helpless against a superior enemy. We cannot abandon others who face the same situation. One by one, the other species representatives voiced their positions. The vote was close, but the intervention faction prevailed by a narrow margin. Humanity would extend its protection to the threatened species in the Andromeda contact zone. Kane felt the weight of this decision as she prepared to address the galaxy. This is Admiral Jessica Kane of the Earth Defense Fleet, speaking to all civilizations capable of receiving this transmission. She paused, thinking about Commander Elena Rodriguez and the warning she had died trying to deliver. That warning had been ignored, leading to a war that transformed the galaxy. Now Kane was delivering her own warning to potential aggressors throughout known space. The Galactic Protection Council has voted to extend our authority to prevent genocide and oppression wherever it occurs. Any civilization that threatens innocent populations will face the combined military forces of 44 allied species. Kane looked directly into the transmission device, knowing that her words would be heard by countless alien civilizations. We offer the same choice to every species in the galaxy that we offered to the Vortani Empire. You can choose to respect the rights of innocent beings and live in peace under the protection of the Galactic Alliance. Or you can choose to threaten innocent populations and face the consequences. She concluded her address with words that would become the foundation of galactic law for generations to come. The galaxy has learned what happens when warnings are ignored. The galaxy has learned what happens when civilizations believe that superior technology gives them the right to murder children and families. The galaxy has learned what happens when humans are forced to stop being civilized and start being survivors. The transmission ended, but Kane continued speaking for the historical record. Commander Elena Rodriguez died trying to warn the Vortani Empire that humans don't abandon their own. Her warning was ignored, and the consequences transformed the galaxy. Today, we extend that same warning to every civilization among the stars. Kane looked out at the space around New Geneva Station, where ships from dozens of different species worked together to maintain the peace that humanity had established through strength and maintained through justice. Humans remember. Humans protect their own. And now, the galaxy is humanity's own. The war that had begun with the murder of innocent civilians in a remote mining station had ended with the establishment of a new galactic order, based on the protection of the innocent and the punishment of those who threatened them. The Vortani Empire's greatest mistake had been ignoring the warning about human determination. That mistake had cost them their empire and given the galaxy a chance to build something better. The warning had been delivered, the warning had been ignored, the consequences had transformed the stars themselves.